started.
All right, great. Thank you, Jeanette, for the excellent introduction and overview. So, hello, and thank you, everybody, for being here today. And welcome to the Lighthouse Financial Planning Educational Series. My name is Debbie Gross, and I am going to be talking about education funding. So, I'm going to start with a typical question that we receive whenever we discuss education funding or college education planning, and that is, what's the best way to save? I often hear people say something along the lines of, I have a 529 account open for my child, I'm making contributions, I think I've got my education plan in order. I do get a lot of questions about, well, which one of these tools up here are the best way to save when I'm thinking about college education funding? And, trying to answer that question without having a lot more detail and information around the specifics of a plan is somewhat like asking a carpenter, what tool do you like best, the hammer, the screwdriver, or a level? Likely the carpenter is going to tell you I need to know a little bit more about the job and what I'm supposed to do, and then I can tell you, which is my favorite tool and which one I like the best. And so that very much applies to education funding and trying to develop a good financial plan. So with that in mind, today what I'm going to cover is framing up the plan. Once we frame up what your plan looks like, it becomes much easier to decide which tools are the right tools for you to use and to develop strategies in order to reduce your out-of-pocket costs. Oh, I have a typo there. I do apologize. So, to begin with, I'm going to start with the framework. And in framing up your plan, there are really three steps or three questions that we need to ask. They are, what stage are you in, what type of financial family are you, and what type of student are we planning for? So step one, what stage? This is the easiest of the three questions to answer, either your early stage or your late stage. Early stage is generally before the child starts in high school. We're still kind of early stage at about the time freshman, maybe sophomore, but once they get to be about a sophomore and beyond, well, we're pretty much out of time for saving, and the focus becomes much more on mitigating the college costs.
And we need to determine what type of family we're planning. There's just three types of families. The first being those who will definitely qualify for need-based financial aid due to limited or no assets and limited household income. Type 3, definitely not qualified, regardless of what type of planning, how we structure assets. These are families who have significant assets outside of retirement and have large incomes. Around with the number a little bit, and basically if you have assets over 5,000, so sometimes in excess of 75,000 or in excess of 175,000, with no assets, then you're certainly not going to you're going to fall to the type family. And then we have the two families who, with some planning structuring of the type of accounts we save in, may be eligible for financial aid or basic financial aid. So in order to know what type of family you are, we go through the needs of this. And it's basically this here. I'll walk through it in just a minute, but note of this equation, a little bit of a discussion, and so that's what I'm going to go through now. So to begin, we have the cost dependence. You can see off to the right, I have the little bubble that indicates what cost for the school year 2011-2012. Public is $70,500. private schools bring you more in the neighborhood of $3,500. So with the cost of attendance, subtract what the expected family contribution is, arrive at the financial. If the student has any resources, then they subtract out to arrive at the additional. So I have an example here, and I'll run through, but I do want to touch on each one of these items. We'll go to expected family contribution next. So in order to determine what your expected family contribution is, that you need to fill out a free application for federal aid, or the online at a number of websites. Org is probably the best place to go and sign up for the FAFSA and go through the calculation. The application requests a variety and information about your situation, everything from your income to the number of people living in the household, to assets you have, and age of everybody. The FAFSA, at the end of it, it does about the expected family contribution. For planning purposes, there are simplified versions of the out there, or calculators that will determine what the expected contribution is. So on our website, we have one of these simplified versions of the FAFSA that will determine what your expected family contribution is. I have an example here. We have the Smith family. We have and Dixie, who is age, and Jeff, who is age. Their house income is $100,000. Own their home, have about $30,000 equity, and they have $20,000 in the emergency reserve. Their expected family contribution is going to be $17,467. So, before we go to the example of the needs analysis, a couple of things to find out about the expected family contribution. There are two methodologies to determine it. There is the method and the institution method. The federal method used, I guess, for federal financial aid and federal loans. The institution method is what private institutions, private colleges will typically use. A little giving in terms of assets. You can see some of the factors listed down below. We've got income, and the agents generally about 42% of the household income is considered. These are the federal methodology, slightly less than the institutional methodology. As the parents are older, that 42% becomes less. I can't speak to how it drops. I do know that having older children, the household income is the table, so to speak. The in college is a factor. So you have two students to college at the same time. That can significantly reduce the family contribution that for the assets. About 5% value of any assets you have outside of retirement accounts are included. It's important to consider that retirement accounts are not included in this family item. So any 401s or IRAs, traditional IRAs, are not included in the expected family contribution. And the student resources are considered 100% available. That's an important planning point, something to highlight. If we take a look at what is considered a resource, I've got a list here of the common ones. Any TMA, GMAs the student may have are going to be considered resources, as are savings accounts, bonds, checking account, grant-owned 29 plans. It's a very important point to, if we're planning for a type 2, trying to get to be family, and parents involved in funding. We want to have a conversation about, does it make sense for the grandparent, the owner, or should it more probably be the parent? But, you know, that's just a discussion, a planning opportunity, and something to love. And then, of course, if the student has any income, those are 100% available. Our needs analysis calculation, we have an example. This is a family again. We've got and she just wanted to attend SU Sacramento, so the cost of it is going to be $20,500. The expectation, as we saw just a moment ago, is $18,500, which leaves a need of $3,000. Now, Dixie have a grandparent-owned 29, not working, any types of accounts, so it's down to the adjusted finance need. And we can see through our example that the family is a type 2 family.
They may be eligible to utilize some of the tools that they may not have otherwise been eligible for. Again, that'll become clear here in just a little bit. So the last step in determining our plan framework is related to the student. So what kind of student are we dealing with? Do we have a gifted and talented student that is, you know, exceptional in some sort of sport or academically? If that's the case, that's going to help out quite a bit because schools will compete for certain types of students. I'll elaborate on that in just a few minutes here. If you have an engaged student, meaning that they're engaged in the process, they're excited about going to school, they want to help out as far as being competitive, doing well in school, they're willing to write letters and apply for grants, write essays, that definitely helps. And the other thing is that we want to try to find an appropriate school for your child. So by that, what I mean is if we have the engaged student, there's things that they can do. They can, they can look and see what schools are appropriate for them and that may compete for them. Each year, colleges predetermine the profiles of the students that they're trying to attract. And if your student's profile matches what the school is trying to attract, they'll be much more competitive in what they'll offer them. So in a moment, we're going to be talking about grants and free money. And there's both need-based grants and merit-based grants that I'll touch upon. But when the student is engaged and they are a good fit for the school, then there can be a lot more attractive offerings from the school to make the package sweeter and the student want to attend that school. So there's, I could probably talk at length about this and strategies. There's a wonderful volume of information available at collegeboard.com. We've got, I'd mentioned that the student can compete for merit-based grants. I've got a website here that is a wonderful place to do some research about grants that are available. And, the student, again, they want to be properly prepared for any time they're going to be interacting with campus and faculty. And so, again, up on our website, on our education planning page, there's a number of resources about how to properly prepare for a campus visit and things that they definitely want to consider.
Debbie, may I interrupt for a moment?
Oh, absolutely. Please do.
We have a question.
Okay.
And so we just want to back up just a little bit. We have someone that wants to know if you can elaborate on what's included in the cost of attendance. Does it include only tuition, or does it also include books, housing, food, transportation, etc.?
Okay, so the cost of attendance generally includes the tuition, books, room, and board. It doesn't include other things like food or things like that. It covers the basics. So things that can also be included in there are like computers. If you want to buy a laptop or other types of things, but generally not food, but shelter and room and board, basically. Does that answer the question?
Well, hopefully I'll watch for any more questions,
Okay.
and I'll kind of pop in if there's more.
Okay. One other thing I'll say about that is that the for a detailed list, publication 970 of the IRS, they have that publication. It details exactly what is considered qualified educational expenses, and so that 20,500 or the 40,500 are basically the qualified educational expenses. Okay, so what we've got here is just helping a student. Part of our job as parents in getting our students ready for school and is the funding part of it, but then also helping them decide what it is they want to study, because it can really add significantly to the cost of an education if the child changes its major or they want to change schools. That can significantly increase the price that you might otherwise pay for the education. So, a number of resources, the high school counselors, that collegeboard.org, they have a number of aptitude tests that you can take. And then, one thing that my husband and I are doing with our 8- and 10-year-old right now is just exposing them to a lot of different things, both sports and music and science, to try and see where their interests are and their hobbies, and trying to just flesh that out so that we can help them identify what it is that they're going to want to study when they go to school. So now we're going to talk for a little bit about the types of tools that are available to us in the education planning world. So we've got grants, savings and investments, loans, tax deductions and credits, and income gifting. We'll start with grants. So as I mentioned just a bit ago, that there are two types of grants basically. There are need-based grants and there are merit-based grants. So the need-based, if I go back to that needs analysis, the equation, the type 2 family, that the Smiths, if you'll recall, they had about a $3,000 need. It's very likely that they'd be eligible for some grants. Now, as far as the actual formula and how that happens, that's a very detailed process and it's a very complex process, and so I can't speak specifically to it because it would take a long time and it would be very confusing, and nobody wants to listen to that. But it's likely they would be good candidates for receiving some sort of grant money. Now, it wouldn't be any more than the $3,000, but $1,000 here, a couple $1,000 there, with some of the other tools that we're going to talk about in a minute, that can definitely help. So with regard to the merit-based grants, this is where the engaged student comes in, and they can compete based on either their skill. It could be, an athletic skill, or some, they're very very bright and have, a big future in, I don't know, developing a cure for cancer or something. In any case, there's a number of places that you can go to look for merit-based aid, and as I mentioned earlier, I think it was fin.aid.org is the website that is kind of a national repository for grants, merit-based grants that are out there. But also the colleges themselves or the university themselves, they have a number of grants and scholarships that are awarded on a competitive basis. For example, I've been working with CSU Sacramento, the College of Business, for the last year and trying to bring an undergraduate degree, financial planning degree program on campus. And I'm very excited to mention, just a quick side note, that this fall of 2012, they'll be offering an undergraduate degree in financial planning for the first time. Very excited about that. But related to that, we had to get some sponsors for the program, and the sponsors are offering significant grants, anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000 a year for that very specific degree program. And so checking with the financial aid office of whatever school your student might be attending is very worthwhile, because they'll be able to give you information about the different types of grants or competitive scholarships that are available. So you can look anywhere. A lot of big employers. I know we have a couple of Intel employees on the call today, and Intel, I'm fairly certain they have a number of grants that are available as well. So with regard to savings and investments, we've got these are the typical tools or types of accounts that you can open. We've got the 529 savings plan and the 529 prepaid tuition plan. The main difference there is that one, you're locked into a specific school, that's the prepaid tuition plan, whereas the 529 savings account, you have a lot more flexibility in terms of what school you want to go to. When you put the money into these accounts, you don't get a tax deduction or anything, but any growth, appreciation in the value of the account, when you take it out, there's no tax that will be paid on that growth, so long as it's spent on qualified education expenses. So on the Coverdell, what's nice about the Coverdell is that you can use money in that account for primary education. It doesn't need to be on post-high school expenses, whereas the 529 plan, that's only eligible for post-high school type of education, and the Coverdell can be used for high school or private school in the primary education. Savings bonds, typically we think about the series, the double E series, and that is the similar to the 529 plans, that if the proceeds are used for qualified educational expenses, then there's no tax that will be paid on the appreciation. So the Roth IRA, that is one of the tools that probably, if I did have to pick a favorite, it would be the Roth IRA, and that is simply because when you put the money in to that type of an account, you don't get a tax break in that year, but any growth and appreciation is not taxed so long as you meet some rules. So this Roth IRA is generally a retirement, an individual retirement account is what the IRA stands for. However, there are provisions that if you take the money out and spend it on the qualified educational expenses, that's one of the permitted uses for taking the money out of that. So, and then of course we have taxable savings accounts that you can use. What I've got here, it's a terrible slide, but it's wonderful information. It's terrible in the context of this kind of a plan, in that there's a lot of detailed information. But I wanted to put it up here in case anybody wanted to, come back later and look at it. But what it does is it lays out the pros and cons of the various college saving plans that are available, and some important information. I'll also have this up on our website on that education funding plan page by the end of the day. So this is generally where we get a lot of questions. I'm going to pause for a minute and see, Jeanette, do we have anybody who has questions, or I'll maybe just take kind of a minute to pause and see if anybody wants to ask any questions.
It doesn't look like we have any questions from people attending. However, I actually have a question.
Okay.
On the student resources. I know, going back to what's included, you're saying that if the student has a savings account in their name, that's calculated into the cost.
Yes.
Now, what about a checking account in their name?
Yep.
Same thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, anything that's in the name of the student, whether it be savings account, bonds, investments, checking account, if it's going to show up on the reports that the financial aid office use, and I believe they pull them by Social Security number, then they're gonna look at that. So yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet.
And right now, no one else has any other questions at the moment, so it looks like we can move forward.
Okay, good. So I'm going to move into loans and talking about loans a little bit. There are, one thing that I'll just say about loans in general, there are federally subsidized loans and then there are non-federally subsidized loans, and I would strongly encourage everyone to stay away from the non-federal loans. They don't have the protections. They've often, I've heard nightmares about that being a predatory lending environment, much like what we saw in the mortgage lending environment, a few years back, that the terms and the rates can be very, very punitive for the borrowers. And so with that in mind,
At the moment, so it looks like we can move forward.
okay, good. So I'm going to move into loans and talking about loans a little bit. There are, one thing that I'll just say about loans in general, there are federally subsidized loans and then there are non-federally subsidized loans, and I would strongly encourage everyone to stay away from the non-federal loans. They don't have the protections. They've often, I've heard nightmares about that being a predatory lending environment, much like what we saw in the mortgage lending environment, a few years back, that the terms and the rates can be very, very punitive for the borrowers. And so with that in mind, I would strongly encourage anybody to stick with federal loans. So the three types of loans that are federally backed or part of the federal program are the Perkins loan, which that is basically for type 1 families. You're going to have to qualify. They can, it's definitely for the needy student. So I didn't put up an awful lot of information up here about this, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to follow up with them about that. Some of the more interesting loans for us to talk about here today are the federal Stafford loans, and it's a fixed rate, and you'll notice here that that there are limits of what you can borrow depending on what year of school you're in, and you'll also notice that there are subsidized and unsubsidized portions. So what I'll say is for all of these federally subsidized loan or federally loans through the federal program, they no payments are required to be made while the student is in school. There are some rules to follow, but in general, as long as the student is at least 50%, i.e. 12 units or more, then there are no payments that are required until graduation, and then there's a 6-month what do I want to say, grace period before repayment is started. So you'll note that the subsidized loans, they have a 3.4 at present. The interest rate is 3.4%, and it's it's got a lower limit for the freshmen. You can borrow up to $3,500, and those subsidized loans do not accrue interest while the student is in school. The unsubsidized do accrue interest, but in both cases, payments are not required to be made until the 6 months after graduation. So one thing that I'll note, if anybody's been paying attention, and then I'll post a link on our Facebook page. President Obama recently did an address about these federal subsidized loans that right now the subsidized portion is 3.4%, and that will double come July unless Congress acts to fix it. Of course, we're caught up in a political discussion about it, and so time will tell if that's going to double or not, but it's just something to be aware of. That's what the environment is like right now, and we'll just monitor it as time goes on. So dropping down to the PLUS loans, that's another federal program. The interest rate is a little bit higher. The parents, these are typically the parent loans. With the Stafford loan, it can be the parent or the child who does the borrowing, but the parents can borrow all the way up to the cost of attendance less any other financial aid, and the payments are deferred until after graduation. So does anybody have any questions at this point?
Actually, Debbie, we have two questions.
Okay.
One is pertaining to what you're talking about right now, and then we'll back up and ask another question. What determines the interest rate variation of 6.8% compared to 3.4%?
Great question. So the 3.4% interest rate applies to the subsidized portion of the loan. So in the example of the freshman, the 3.4 would apply to the $3,500, but if you wanted to borrow up to the $5,500, then the 6.8 would apply.
Okay, great. And then I wanted to back up real quick to the student income once again, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
We have a question. Would it be in the best interest of the student to not have a job when applying? And if so, how long do they need to be out of work? Is it just not employed at the time of the application, or how does that work?
That's a great question. So, the way that the FAFSA works is you complete the FAFSA. It was just due, I think in March was the due date, and it's based, actually it can't be March, it's later, it's right now, it's in the spring is when the FAFSA is done, and it's backwards looking. So if you have a student who is going off to school, let's just say they're a freshman this fall, so their school year would be 2012, 2013. That FAFSA information for that school year would be based on 2011's income information. So
okay.
it's somewhat retroactive looking. So if in 2011 they didn't work, in 2012 they did, it wouldn't be included for their upcoming year. However, in the subsequent year, it would be included. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions at this point?
Not at this point.
Okay. Good. Let's see. So, moving on from loans. So, the next tool that we like to take a look at and plan around is a little help from Uncle Sam, i.e. education deductions and credits. So the important point I'd make here is pointing out over on the right-hand column, the income phase-outs. And so the first credit that we have on the chart is the American Opportunity Credit. And basically what that says is that for every dollar you spend, you get 40 cents of a credit. So 40% of every qualified education dollar you spend, you get a 40% credit up to $4,000, or you get the credit tops out at $2,500. However, if you're a type 3 family, then your income, and your income is going to exceed $160,000, then you're not eligible for this credit. Similar with the lifetime learning credit, and that is for every dollar of qualified educational expense you have, you get a 20% credit. So up to $10,000, you have to spend up to $10,000 to get the full credit there. However, that's got a much lower phase out. So an important point about these credits, you really want to work with a tax professional and be aware of the rules, because you can't combine them. You can take one or the other. However, if you have two students in school at the same time, one student can take one and the other can take the other. And there's just some rules to be around. But it's one of the tools that we definitely want to look at when we're putting together the planning, and especially, obviously, when we're in the late stage, when we're focused on mitigating and reducing the cost. The savings bonds, we talked about those as one of the options earlier. Just note here that there is a phase out. Coverdale, same thing. And student loans, we just talked about student loans. The interest that you pay on those student loans is deductible up to $2,500. However, as you can see here, we do have the phase out. So if it's a married filing joint, if you have income over $120,000, then that's going to you're not going to be eligible. Anybody have any questions about this part?
I'm not seeing any yet. I'm trying to see if someone's going to type anything in, but not at the moment. So we may want to just come back to it.
Okay, so what I'll say, if anybody's typing questions, what I'll say about this is that the credits, the American Opportunity Tax Credit and the Lifetime Learning Credit, both of those are set to expire at the end of 2012. They often are written back into the tax law and extended. However, it's not a guaranteed thing. Like with most things, when we're putting a plan together, we plan with what we know and what we have before us right now. But in 3-4 years, these credits might look considerably different, and it's just part of our public policy and the fun with the tax law that we get to look at each year. Our public policy and the fun with the tax law that we get to look at each year. Okay, another tool, and this tool typically works for more of the type 3 families, but not necessarily, it's not, we're not limited to the type 3 family, and that is the income shifting. So the UTMAs and the UGMAs, those really are considered gifts to a child, and it's an effective way to give the child some money. However, remember, it's going to be a part of the student's resources, and if you're a type 3 family and you're not going to be eligible for need, well then, there's no big deal. The thing that I would mention about UTMAs and UGMAs is that it's probably the thing you have least control over. So you can give the money to the student, but there's no guarantee that the student is going to pay for school or go to school with it. An upside is that if they don't go to school, there's no penalty for spending the money on something else. But, it's just something to be aware of. The next income shifting item we have is gift of an income producing property. So an example of that, I was talking with some farming friends of mine, and we were talking about, one thing that they could do is they have a farm, and they have, many different types of pieces of equipment that they could give, their student a tractor, and now the student owns the tractor, and they turn around and rent it back to the farm, and they get paid an income for that. So what we're doing is basically shifting some income to the child, and is taxed at much more favorable rates. I've got a note here that we need to be aware of kitty tax rules, and that's definitely part of the plan, but it's one of the strategies. And so, when we're looking at a plan and we're dealing with a type 3 family, these, it's definitely a tool, and it can be a very effective tool, much like the next one, a gift of appreciated property. So an example here would be if you have again, kind of going back to my Intel people, you have your restricted stock units or your stock purchase whatever kind of incentive stock option that you have your basis in that stock is much lower, and for the gift rules, your basis is what is considered for the transfer. So right now the annual gift exclusion is $13,000. So while the market value of the security, stock, or investment, whatever the property is, it may be much higher on the market, but your tax basis is $13,000, and you can transfer that to them, and then the child is able to benefit from all that gain, and it's taxed at a much more favorable rate. And that's that's a little more complex, and there's a lot more to it. Of course, the tax code. Definitely want to be involved with our tax professional, but it's definitely an option and a very effective tool in helping to reduce your overall out-of-pocket cost. The last income shifting topic that I have up here is the child's earnings. So anybody who has has a business. So I love this example because I can personalize it, and that is as a partner here at Lighthouse, Jim, if you're listening, I could say, gosh, we need some new faces up on our website. Let's hire some models, and we'll take pictures of them and put their pictures up on the website. So the models would be my children that we could pay model fees to. That's earned income from them. Now we can shift that earned income into a Roth IRA. There's some rules around how that can be invested, but the point is that we can get some money for them into a very tax-favored type of an account. And oh, by the way, because they're my children, I don't have to pay employer tax on it, meaning I don't have to pay Social Security or Medicare on those wages to that child, whereas anybody else that we would hire at Lighthouse, we have to pay those employment tax. So it's just it's a way to really reduce your overall tax burden, shift some money to the child that can then later be used for education funding. In the meantime, they're 10 and 8. We have some years for it to appreciate. In any case, that's an example of that. Does anybody have any question on the income shifting?
Hi, Debbie. Right now, we don't have any questions, but we'll circle back to it.
Okay, good.
Hi, Debbie. Right now, we don't have any questions, but we'll circle back to it.
Okay, good. So we've talked about the framework, we've talked about the tools, and now we're moving into the strategies of how to reduce your out-of-pocket cost. And so really there's 4 strategies. We want to go after free or low-cost money to the fullest extent possible. We want to have Uncle Sam pay whatever part of the cost or give us back, give us a credit back for the money that we've spent. We want to look at any savings that we are going to be doing, and we want to make sure that we're doing that in the most tax-efficient way. And then we also, I really need to focus on the competitive student element, and that's, the student's part of helping to fund their money. So we've got those 4 strategies. And what I tried to do in this summary of all of this and bring some order or sense of, okay, now we've got all these things, how do we go forth and actually implement the plan? Well, so what we do is we look at, are we in early stage or are we in late stage? And so, what type of family are we in? So once you have answered those 2 questions, then you can just go to your box. So if you're an early stage type 2 family, then what we can do is we really focus on the tax-favored savings and income strategies and the competitive student element. And that's the tax-favored strategies, 529s, Roth, IRAs. If I'm a type 2 family, I'm probably not going to want to put any money in a UTMA or the savings bonds because they have a negative effect on the expected family contribution, so I want to stay away from that as much as possible. Now, if it's a type 3 family, well, then that's a different stage because they're not going to be eligible for any of the free money at any point, down here when we get to the later stage. So, with the type 2 and the type 3 family, that's where we need to be really careful about, when we're in early stage, yeah, we want to look at, strategies that are going to be tax efficient and tax favored. In type 2 family, they might be eligible for free or low cost money, and so we definitely want to be careful about the accounts and what we're doing. But these type 3 families over here, it doesn't matter. There's nothing that we're going to be able to do for them to put them in line for any free money. So, and they're likely not going to be eligible for any of the tax credits. So we just really want to focus on the best way to do that, to take advantage of the tax favored saving and then the income shifting strategies. So, in conclusion, I hope that I've been able to kind of frame up the discussion and help you think about how to approach this big topic of education funding. And one of the things that I'd like to just highlight and emphasize at this point is that education funding is one of the many goals that you typically have. I mean, the clients that we work with, retirement, education funding, something about a house, but there's all of these goals, and while this education funding is a very big and very involved funding plan, we really want to emphasize that it should play well with the rest of your plan and that it needs to have a lot of flexibility, because the more flexibility we have, if for some reason your child gets a scholarship and you have all this money saved in education funding, to take it out, you're going to have some sort of penalty, which is why I really am, in favor of the Roth IRA at this point and using that to its fullest capacity before moving on to other ones. It promotes a good harmony within your overall financial plan, and that's just, it's part of the work of creating a good education funding plan, is just making sure that it's well coordinated and in harmony with the rest of your plan. I've touched on a number of topics, and as you can see, I probably could spend the rest of the day drilling down on each one of these topics. And the thing that I would just encourage you to be aware of is that the more you know about this